Welcome back after a week off. Total Hockey Now is back, and boy, do we have a lot of to talk about after the free agency frenzy. I am at Pucking Thoughts. The man to my right, if you're looking at the screen, is at Ant Herrera 86, and the man down below at Fuzzy Chris 91. Chris, I believe it was a national holiday for you yesterday, not just referring to free agency. So there you go. It was a happy Canada Day.
Happy indeed, it was Canada Day. Yes, shout out to all the Canadians who. The best time of year, because I know some people are like, oh, I wish I could take July 1st off. And I'm like, man, I don't know what it's like living in a world where July 1st isn't a holiday. So
there you go. National Cat. And I will say I may melt on the air today as it's currently 107.7 degrees outside my window right now. So we'll just keep that in mind.
What is that in Celsius?
About 42. I looked it up for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reasonably accommodating me and my and the temperature that the rest of the world uses.
Yeah, you know, it's like 41.6, something like that. Yeah, it's pretty hot here, but it's not as hot as free agency was, and we got a lot to get into here, so I don't think we waste any time and we just dive right in here. And don't forget, give us a rate, review, subscribe on YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and also we got some content over on Facebook, so check us out there. But without further ado, let's start talking free agency. We'll weave draft stuff in as we can where relevant. But first and foremost, I think we got to start in Nashville here with the Predators, making probably the biggest splash of free agency on multiple accounts. They bring in Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Skjei. Terms of those contracts. Marchessault, he gets 5 years, 27.5 mil. Stamkos, 4 years, 32 million. Brady Skjei, 7 years, 49 million. And this all comes after they had signed UC Saros to an 8-year, $62 million extension, locking up the crease there. They also bring in Scott Wedgwood to back him up. So, you know, I don't think any of us were necessarily surprised to see Stamkos go to Nashville because that was a team we had mentioned as a real possibility. But I mean, I didn't expect Nashville to go in as heavy as they did.
Yeah, they definitely went in heavy on this free agency, and a lot of these players also were linked to the Devils, Stamkos, as well as Marchessault. Look, we talked about it in our previous video, and you can go back into the archives and check it out. We were talking about Stamkos. You just mentioned it right now, and you know, I thought he would go back to Tampa. But I also thought if he was going to go to a new team, the team I would want him to go to is Nashville. And this is a good spot for him. We talked about it off air, how the Predators were that close to beating Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs. And you look at adding Stamkos, Skjei, and Marchessault, and you know that's a team right there that can go a little bit deeper into the playoffs next year.
Yeah, good on the Nashville Predators. Good on Barry Trotz. Homie just opened his wallet on July 1st and said, here, take this, you take this. I was a little shocked when they decided to sign UC Saros because I'm like, what are we doing here? I thought we were going to move him. And now it kind of makes sense because Barry Trotz is like, hey, if we're going to give this a run, we're going to do it. And like you said, they were really close against Vancouver. So now they come out, they spend the money. Yes, Marchessault is a little bit older. The term, I mean, 5 years is a lot, but kind of one of those things where you live with the consequences later on. Like if you win, nobody's going to worry about that, right? The same thing for Steven Stamkos. I think they were willing to go out there and give him the money that he has earned, I guess, in a way. Even if he's 34, if he can stay healthy, he can definitely contribute. Nashville looks really good, man. This is a good team. I also learned that the state of Tennessee also has no income tax. I've learned a lot about what states do not have income tax because that apparently is the reason why Canada can't attract anybody. It's the income tax rule. But good for these, you know, good for the Nashville Predators for going out, spending the money. They've made their team better. That Central Division is extremely hard to compete in. Like Colorado is a really good team. So is Dallas. We're going to find out about Minnesota because that's what we thought would be there. So if Nashville wants to keep up in that Central Division, they have made a case for it now. You can no longer just lock in the top 3 teams and say, okay, fight for a wild card spot. Nashville has put themselves in the conversation and say, hey, we want to be a good team, but we also want to compete in our division. Now they just got to do it. Now they have to be good.
And they already had their line of O'Reilly, Forsberg, and Nyquist, and now Stamkos and Marchessault, they have some familiarity with each other from when Marchessault played in Tampa Bay. So now, assume that's going to be Tommy Novak in the middle of that line, or if Stamkos isn't going to center it. And then, Nashville's now got an established top six, and they're a real team to mess with. And obviously, Saro staying around. This is not a team that's looking to compete and win, just this year. They're looking at the next 2-3 years as legitimate window for them to compete for a championship. So we'll see what the President adding Brady Skjei on the blue line. Certainly nothing wrong with that. They trade McDonough out to Tampa Bay, which we'll talk about in a second. Now they have Skjei and Yossi there to form quite the top pairing. And like you said, Nashville's done a lot of upgrading there. And now it's, on paper, it looks great. And we'll see what happens when they hit the ice in that division. Now, the team that Stamkos left after many, many years, the Tampa Bay Lightning, they add Jake Guentzel, and they overhaul their roster as well. First, Guentzel, they traded Carolina, our third-round pick, to get his negotiating rights. Always a good sign. Then they signed him to a 7-year, $63 million deal. They make a trade with Utah, sending Mikhail Sergachev there for Connor Geekie, J.J. Moser, and a 2025 second-round pick and a seventh-round pick in this year's draft. And then they trade out Tanner Jeannot to L.A. For a 2025 second-round pick and pick 118 in the most recent draft. And then today they extended Victor Hedman 4 years, $32 million. Just mentioned that they had acquired McDonough earlier in the offseason. So they lose Stamkos. They bring Guentzel in. Sergachev was a piece to move. Moser will kind of, obviously they won't fill the void of Sergachev, but he'll take that place on the blue line. Tampa Bay is loaded up and ready to go here for another run at it for a few years.
Yeah, this is what really good general managers do, right? They're able to, and I read it in a Hockey News article, remodel this Tampa team. And sometimes when you're doing that, you have to say goodbye to some very important, very big pieces like Steven Stamkos has been for, what is it now, over a decade in Tampa. So, just
16 years if you're counting, but that's because he's tormented Montreal.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah, so, they had to do what they had to do to stay relevant in the playoff hunt. It wasn't a big last couple of seasons for them in the playoffs, and this maybe gives them a little more, wiggle room to stay around. I don't know what the McDonough deal really does for them, bringing him back, but maybe he can rekindle what he did when he was there last time.
I'm having a hard time understanding. Like, I don't know if the Tampa Bay Lightning are really better or worse after all of this. I feel like it's a lot of lateral moves. Adding Jake Guentzel obviously helps your scoring. He can basically be the replacement of Steven Stamkos. Stamkos is no longer a centerman in my mind. I think he's better suited to be a winger. He's just getting up there. That's okay. Nothing wrong with it. Guentzel plays the wing. He was very productive in Pittsburgh. He was very good in Carolina as well. Now he's going to go play with Nikita Kucherov and Brayden Point. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So from that standpoint, I can be okay. It's definitely a question mark to say, hey, I'll bring in Ryan McDonough, and then kind of at the expense of saying, well, if I'm going to give Jake Guentzel this amount of money, I have to free up some money. So I got to let Sergachev go. And I feel like that was a tough one to say, okay, we're going to move Sergachev out. And I get that Ryan McDonough's deal is shorter. I get what he can bring. It's fine. The Tanner Jeannot trade, to me, it just feels like Breezeball is saying, hey, we lost this because they gave up a mess of picks for this, and it didn't work out. That was not it. So I get what Breezeball is trying to do on the run here. He's got him. I'm not going to question it because he has been to the Stanley Cup final in 3 years in a row once upon a time and has won 2 Stanley Cups. So, like, the blueprint is there. I think he knows how to work it. I get people not being happy with Steven Stamkos. The NHL is a business. Let's not forget that. They are in the business of winning, and sometimes you got to make those extremely difficult calls, and that is one, having to let Steven Stamkos basically walk and say, hey, man, I'm sure Stamkos had said that he was willing maybe to take a little bit less. I don't think he was going to get 8 from Tampa Bay. I'm sure he probably could have settled on 6, maybe. A lot of people were saying that Tampa Bay was offering him 3, which I think was
if that's what they were offering him, then yeah, see you later.
A little too low in a state with no state income tax. It's a little too low. So I understand how tough it is. I get that it's hard. There are a lot, it's hard for him. It's hard for his family. It's hard for the fans. It's hard for everybody. It's a tough decision to make. But as a once general manager said publicly to an entire fan base, if you want loyalty, get a dog, right? Marc Bergevin. when he did not re-sign Andre Markov. It was tough. So again, the NHL is not about loyalty. I understand some people want to do that, but this is a business first. In the same way that players are allowed to test free agency, they have no loyalty at that point. General managers have none on the other way. This is a business. This is about winning. And we'll see if Tampa Bay is a better team because of the moves that they've made.
Staying in the state of hockey, apparently, with Florida winning all the Stanley Cups, the Panthers, they did lose some players. That's expected to happen, after a cup. But they do bring Dmitry Kulikov back on a 4-year deal. And they do bring Sam Reinhart back 8 years and a nice $69 million, 8.63 AAV. So, they lose Kevin Stenlund. They lose Brandon Montour. Vladimir Tarasenko's still out there. Maybe they decide to bring him back. I don't know. But the guy they needed to keep if they want to defend their championship was Reinhart, and they did it.
Hey, good for them. That deal too for Sam Reinhart is extreme. I feel like it's very team friendly. I feel like I get that it's $8+ million for 8 years, and Sam Reinhart is, as most players do, have a career year and a contract year. But I mean, again, I feel like he probably could have flirted with Jake Guentzel money and maybe even a little bit more. I thought it would come down to like 10 and a half. So getting it at that deal for Florida seems pretty good. Maybe the loss of Brandon Montour is going to hurt a little bit. It is what it is. I don't think Oliver Ekman-Larsson leaving is going to leave that much of a hole. I mean, Stolarz, Lundberg, all these, like, those are guys around the core that you can replace at the cost of whatever you need to pay for it. It's not that expensive. But Florida did keep most of what they needed to intact, and we're going to see what else they're going to do. But signing of Reinhart was key. It was a rock and roll week for Sam Reinhart. He wins the Stanley Cup. He can't go to like the parade because he was going to his best friend's wedding. I mean, don't we all want friends like that? I'd be like, no, I'll skip the parade to come hang out at a wedding. Yeah. That's a heck of a friend. And then he signs this deal here just before the stroke of midnight, so he can get the 8 years. So it's been a good week, I guess, for Sam Reinhart. I guess I don't know.
I mean, when the NHL spreads the schedule out, it won't be all within a week, probably in the future. But good timing for him.
I mean, it's been a good year for Sam Reinhart. Led the team in points, led the team in goals, wins the Stanley Cup, and now has a nice contract for himself, hoping the Panthers repeat. So we'll see what happens next season for them.
All right, let's stay in the Atlantic here for a few more teams here. First up, we'll talk about the Bruins. One of the concerns we had for them last year was their center depth down the middle. Could Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha get it done? And hey, they got to the second round of the playoffs, good regular season, lose to the eventual Stanley Cup champions. They bring in Elias Lindholm on a 7-year, $54.25 million deal. They also bolster the blue line, adding Nikita Zadorov with a 6-year, $30 million deal, $5 million average annual value. And we'll talk about the Linus Ullmark trade in a second when we get to Ottawa. But they get Joonas Korpisalo back to back them up, and Mark Kastelik as well. It'll help fill out that bottom 6. So they do have that center. Now they got the center depth down the middle. They could even move Pavel Zacha over to the wing if they want. This was one of those, Lindholm to Boston was one of those we heard a lot about, and it just came to fruition. It just made a lot of sense on all sides.
That is an absolutely terrible contract.
It's not a great contract, but yeah.
Man, that is paying premium dollars for like the no-name brand of something, at least in my mind. When I saw that, I was like, man, did we have to spend that? I get that for Boston, we looked at their center core all year and went, what is this? Like, what is happening here? How is this a thing? So they go out, they get Elias Lindholm, and you're like, all right, that makes it better. But you gave him term, you gave him money. I don't really worry about the Zadorov deal. I think they, needed to pay for it. It's fine. Linus Ullmark, it's basically moving out. A goalie, you got Korpisalo back, fine. It is what it is. Jeremy Swayman now, I guess, is the number one guy, and he's going to see, I'm assuming, close to 55 games next year because you don't want Korpisalo to see that many. But that Elias Lindholm contract, it doesn't smell good, and I don't think it's going to age well.
Yeah, probably not at the back end of that. But is Zadorov at $5 million a year? Like, there's part of me that thinks that's a little too much too. But he's going to be a very popular player in Boston, so they're not going to mind that.
No, I think he'll be okay.
I'm wondering if they could have gotten a little bit more for Ullmark because I don't know, Korpisalo is just not it to me. I know he's just going to be the backup, but if Swayman gets hurt, I mean, Chris is going
He's
to
got
have
a
a
better
lot of
team.
fun on Boston's grave if he does.
I mean, he's got a better team in front of him, so hopefully that'll get him to a playable backup level compared to where he was performing at in Ottawa. But yeah, it did not look good for any goaltender in Ottawa last year, but he didn't do anything to help himself either. They also got a 2024 first round pick back in that deal. So,
I had such high hopes for him leaving the Kings after that, season that he had with them. I know he only started in 11 games, but just to help that team get to the playoffs. And, I had big hopes for Ottawa and it just didn't work out at all.
Well, let's talk a little Ottawa then, right? I was just talking about him anyway. Linus Ullmark said the thing that was important to him was he wanted to go somewhere where he knew it was going to be his crease and, it would be more of a traditional 1 and then 1A and then a backup. And he's got that for better or worse in Ottawa. He has certainly got that now. And they trade Jakob Chychrun to Washington for Nick Jensen and a 2026 third round pick. Make a couple of depth additions on the wing. So not much looking different there besides the Chychrun trade. And Ullmark, I don't think anybody's got any real expectations for Ottawa. We're still all waiting to see what happens with Brady Tkachuk here.
Yeah, when you go from where he was in Boston, a year off of winning the President's Trophy and being one of the best teams in hockey, to now all of a sudden going to Ottawa, he's going to be the guy in the crease. But I assume that he's going to regret this a year into this contract and into this trade.
Yeah, this is going to be a rude awakening for him because he's going to show up in Ottawa and realize they do not play defense like they do in Boston. This Ottawa, now that the Arizona Coyotes have moved on, I feel like somebody has to be the team in the NHL where you just kind of look at it and go, what are we doing? And that is the Ottawa Senators here. I have no idea what this team is. They are are we going through another rebuild? Because a couple of years you went out to get Claude Giroux and you were supposed to be good, and now you're not good again. And I mean, this team is just garbage from top to bottom. They're no good. And again, man, some goalies benefit from the system, and that's fine because hockey is a team game and goalies are important. But Ottawa's not good defensively. Jakob Chychrun, they paid a price to get him, and he was nothing like he was when he was in Arizona. In Arizona, he was a guy who could shoot the puck, take up a ton of minutes, block a ton of shots. This man was everything. It shows up at Ottawa, and it's like he died. So I don't know what's going to happen to the Ottawa Senators, but I expect them to be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. That's what I have for them, and I think Ullmark's going to realize real quickly that he's going to get more starts, but he might not. He might not enjoy that. He might get a sunburn from the light being on behind him so often.
And make sure that mask cover, put some sunblock on before, and before the third period too, because it does wear off. So not just before the game, but second intermission as well.
Reapply.
Yes, reapply. Before I give the floor to Chris to talk about Montreal's draft, let's talk about the Toronto blue line quickly here, because that's all we talk about is how their blue line is weak and they don't address it. They can't address it. Well, they definitely addressed it. Yes, they brought in Anthony Stolarz to back up Joseph Woll. They signed Max Domi to a 4-year, $15 million deal, but they bring in Oliver Ekman-Larsson on a 4-year, $14 million deal. They signed Chris Tanev to a 6-year, $27 million deal after getting his negotiating rights from Dallas. And they also signed former Stars defenseman Yanni Hakanpää to a 2-year, $3 million deal. So they have addressed their blue line. Oliver Ekman-Larsson's better days may be behind him. Chris Tanev, provides that grit. But they've at least addressed it in the best way they can, considering their situation.
They've addressed it the same way they addressed it when they went out to get Joel Edmondson and when they went out to get TJ Brody. They're just moving old bodies into that. I will say this. For Chris Tanev, I would definitely take that deal. He got some money. He got some term. So he is a prime candidate to end up on Robitaille Island, right? Because if you know. He looks like a long-term injury, candidate towards the end of that deal. That's just, the man is a warrior, absolute warrior, in the same way that Giordano was at that point. but his body's going to break down at some point. It just has to, the way he plays. And there's nothing wrong with it. Tanev is a great defenseman, but you're thrusting him into a position that's going to be real tough. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, the same thing. He's not the player he once was. Hakanpää's got to do whatever he's got to do. But those are a lot of defensemen that are similar in what they do, which is defense first. You need somebody to move the puck up in Toronto. Toronto's not playing a very defensive type of game. This is a team that wants to move up the ice. They have skilled players up front, so it's about moving the puck out of your defensive zone, quick transition. Outside of Morgan Riley, I don't see a lot of defensemen there with a quick transition. So we're going to have to find out how that blue line is going to structure. But I'm not hopeful. Will they defend well in the penalty kill? Absolutely. Will Chris Tanev go out there and block shots? Maybe. Will, Joseph Woll's probably going to get the start now. They went to go get Stolarz, so that means if Woll can stay healthy, that's his crease. He's a better goalie than Samsonov, so there's some positive here. But I see a lot of defensemen that look. I am old enough to remember when Leaf fans were telling me, "Oh yeah, Joel Edmondson is built for this. He's going to change it." He's not.
No. Now we're gonna have a special guest come in and break down some of the team signings as well, Mr. Jared Moore, who's filled in on the show and been on the show in the past. But before we get to him, we're already in Canada. We may as well just head over to Montreal. And wasn't huge, insanely active in free agency, although they do get max term done for Yuri Slafkovsky. But let's talk about the Montreal draft here, because I don't think there was a negative word said about what Montreal did in the draft. So Chris, take it away.
I was ecstatic. That's the guy I wanted. I had no problem with Caden Lindstrom if he would have been there. That would have been a great pick as well. I knew this was going to go well. I owe the Anaheim Ducks organization, I don't know, an edible arrangement or something. Because when they made their pick, I mean, poor kid was shocked too where he went, but I knew that was good because then it left us with the two options that we wanted. And Lindstrom going to Columbus is fine. Another big body. I had preferred it because he's a centerman, and I know that those are coveted players, big guys who play down the middle. But Davidov is just an elite talent. He is elite. He has 1 year left on his KHL contract, but as we've seen, that means absolutely nothing. KHL teams are more than willing to sell their soul for a couple dollar bills here. So
for real cash.
Right. And even if he stays and he plays in Russia, in the KHL the whole year, that is a professional league with men, and he is 18 years old. So I have no problem. Like, if you're not going to be able to play North America, might as well play in another professional league that, is good. It is what it is. It's the KHL. There are players that come out of the KHL and have a lot of success in the NHL. So I was very, very happy. I was happy to see that, when Hughes goes down, he's got the jersey. It's got, Davidov's name on it, which means that's the guy that we wanted. All the stories behind it of them not wanting to go to Florida and meet with him because they didn't want to tip their hat, and they didn't this was a structured thing. That's the guy they wanted. There's pure skill here with him. He's elite. He can score, which is what Montreal desperately needs. He is in the right spots. Now it's a question of connecting. And then they hand out the nice check to the Slovak king. I mean, Slafkovsky he really grew in that second half. And you can see that he's starting to, figure it out in the NHL. It took him a minute, but he's really starting to use it. The size, the skating's going to come as well. The shot is there. A great term again. There's a lot of structure in Montreal. It was really structured. He's not making a ton of money. He gets his term, which is apparently what he wanted. He wanted the term, and Montreal had no problem giving it to him. That contract can only age better considering how much the salary cap can go up in the next 8 years. This is if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, we're starting to get excited here because we're maybe the rebuild's starting to end. Maybe we're about to turn the page here, but I am excited. I am happy. This was a good day. I'm happy that we didn't go out and spend on all those things that other teams were buying here. These long-term deals on Elias Lindholm and stuff. Keep the credit card, lock it. Say, honey, no, not today. It's too expensive. We'll come back when they're on sale. So we'll check back at the trade deadline and see when we can buy something.
Also, I've heard very good things about Michael Hage, who they got with the 21st overall pick. And then just the cherry on top of the sundae, just, one of the most beloved franchise players in a rich history, Saku Koivu. Let's take his son, too. I mean, was Montreal just everybody in a good mood last Friday night?
Everybody was great. I mean, when you got Celine Dion coming out, I mean, you're selling it here. You're going all out. Everybody's feeling good. Everybody's feeling good. I was happy. I mean, I don't remember the last time I jumped watching the draft. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like having the first overall pick is like cool. Like, you're gonna get a good player. Then whoever you take, it is what it is. But this was one of those where I really wanted them to take an elite goal scorer, somebody who could score, and Demidov fits that, man. So welcome in. You know, if you need somewhere to stay, let me help you. Let me get you accommodated. He probably won't need me, but I'm just saying I will assist if need be.
Oh, it's very nice of you. You kind of offer like a billet, kind of service there. Good for you.
If he needs. I don't speak Russian, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah, listen, you can translate on your phone real quick the phrases you need to, and that's it. Nice and easy. Now, there's a lot to unpack with free agency here, so we're bringing in a guest to help us out here for a little bit. He's got a few teams he wants to talk about here. Mr. Jared Moore, there he is.
Yes.
You can catch us on Rip and Riff tomorrow at our new time of 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific. He was itching to talk free agency. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, but he wanted to get in on the Total Hockey Now Love and talk today. So, Jared, how are we doing?
I'm good. I was about ready to take Chris to task there for the whole, the Canadiens Love Fest, because I figured it was, the annual rite of passage in Montreal is, well, what crazy trade are we going to come up with to dump Josh Anderson in New Jersey? That we haven't quite gotten yet, but there's still some time in the offseason. The offseason's young, but he mentioned our queen, and we stand for Celine Dion. So shout out to the Habs for hitting a home run on that one.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, you write for allaboutthejersey.com. We will talk Devils in a second. But you did we're in the Atlantic Division, and you wanted to talk a little bit about Steve Yzerman's Yzerplan here with the Red Wings and the signings that they've had so far in free agency here.
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things about the Red Wings. First of all, if it wasn't for the Tampa Bay Lightning landing high lottery draft picks with Steven Stamkos and Victor Hedman and some of the other guys the Lightning have drafted over the years, would Tampa even have the championships? Like would Steve Yzerman even be considered a genius? Like, what the hell is the Yzerplan? Like, I don't understand what the hell Detroit is building or what they're trying to do. And this goes back several years with them with some of the free agent signings they've just made, like the Ben Sherratts of the world, the Jeff Petrie, trading for Jeff Petrie. I know he's from Michigan, but whatever, who cares? Like, they have 4 goalies on the roster right now. And like, I'm sure they want to trade like Ville Husso. Good luck. He's making almost $5 million a year. There were those reports out there that they wanted to trade for Jacob Trouba for whatever reason. And that's a whole other thing I want to get into at some point. Like, what are the Red Wings building? Are they building a team that's their ceiling is we're going to get like 92 points and maybe get the second wild card before we get curb stomped by Boston or Florida or whoever in the Eastern Conference playoffs? Like, someone needs to explain to me what the hell Detroit's doing.
Hey, bringing Patrick Kane back, okay, fine on a 1-year deal. He fills a need, a spot, whatever, familiarity, whatever. But the Cam Talbot one was a head scratcher. Like Eric Gustafson, like, all right, whatever. Like, yeah, they're just, there's not much going on there right now.
And they trade a 2nd-round pick to dump Jake Wallman's contract when, the other candidate for worst GM in the league, Mike Greer, is like, oh yeah, we would have claimed him off waivers. So that's just Steve Yzerman, like, not doing his job and like not reading the room. Steve Yzerman right now, he's the poster child for why professional teams should not hire their legends for prominent front office positions, because he's done nothing in 5 years with Detroit other than clear out a bunch of crappy contracts and replace them with a bunch of crappy contracts.
So he had half the plan.
Oh, well, I'm glad he executed half the plan.
Yeah. I mean, I got nothing to say. I mean, you got to maybe, come out a little more fiery, Jared. We want attitude here. Let's kick it up.
All right. Well, how about this? How about I give you a hot take?
Okay.
And you boys can could follow up off of that. Jacob Trouba.
Let's go to the Rangers.
The Rangers making Jacob Trouba a sympathetic figure is not something I had on my 2024 bingo card.
Yeah.
Jacob Trouba, prominently known for his best attribute in the National Hockey League is throwing the flying elbow. Obviously, he doesn't want to be traded. He has modified no trade clause. He had the no move clause that became the no trade clause on July 1st. He has now since submitted a list. Chris Drury famously requested that he submit his list to teams because he wanted to trade them. But obviously, Trouba saw what was going on with the Rangers with the whole Barclay Goodrow situation. Trouba's not a dummy. He has a veteran agent. They know exactly what's up. So, it just feels weird. You had those reports from Larry Brooks, who's basically a mouthpiece for Chris Drury at this point, where it's just like, oh yeah, the deal to Detroit's just about done. I don't know why Detroit's even looking to trade for Jacob Trouba, because that's a whole other thing. Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's anything more than like a $1 million third pairing defenseman at this point. But the fact that like Jacob Trouba, he's got his no trade clause, and now you have people online who are like harassing him and his family because he wants to stay in New York. His wife's got whatever she has going on. She's like,
she's in her medical residency, which is not, you can't leave in the middle. Like that's, you can't leave in the middle of that.
Right. It's not like, quitting your job at, Pop Copy. I couldn't think of Staples. So you're gonna have to.
I like Pop Copy. Nice reference on the Pop Copy.
Yeah, a nice Chappelle Show reference. But yeah, like the fact that like the Ranger fans are making Trouba like a sympathetic figure that like, he earned the right to his no trade clause in his contract. The Rangers gave that to him. And if the Ranger fans are upset about the whole Trouba situation, they probably should be mad at the team for giving him the clause in the first place and not Trouba for looking out for what's best for him.
Listen, I mean, is it frustrating to know that that's the thing that kept you from kept the team from, making an upgrade that they needed to in free agency? Of course. I had my eyes set on Jake DeBrusk, who I thought Vancouver got at a pretty good deal on the right side, but they couldn't do anything without it. It's a bad situation, but I mean, let's not start attacking a guy's family because, like you said, offer anybody here that's watching or on this, offer that contract to you, and then you tell me you're not going to sign it and take those terms. Like, that's again, it's the team's fault for allowing it to happen, for offering it. It's not his fault for signing the deal. And then, these are the terms and I'm going to, abide by them. And, I don't want to go. So they couldn't find a deal with a team that he was willing to go to. And that's that.
Yeah. And like, I feel like that well is a little too poisoned at this point for him to come back. So that's just going to be a whole awkward situation. Like you would think that, I guess eventually he'll read the room and just be like, fine, I'll take a trade to whoever. But like, I'm not sure that's a certainty. I'm not sure how many teams are actually lining up to take on $8 million for 2 years for Jacob Trouba.
Rangers didn't do much in free agency as a result. They signed Sam Carrick on a 3-year deal worth $1 million a year, and then they go and get Riley Smith from Pittsburgh for a 2027 second-round pick and a conditional 2025 fifth-round pick. I don't, it's addressing the need. They needed a right wing or a wing in your top six, but what are you going to do? Not really what we were hoping for as Ranger fans, but again, nothing could happen without the Trouba trade, and it didn't happen, so that was that.
Yeah, you throw on top of that, he had a tough season. He had a really tough, playoffs. The fans are not in on it anymore. And, the fact that they're not able to do anything during free agency because of this deal. And I think the Rangers made that very well known, as Jared mentioned, because, if you can't trade him, there's not much moves to be made. And that's where the fans are going to go after him now. It sucks that they do this. I mean, it's not just Rangers fans. It happens into a lot of teams, a lot of sports. I've seen it with the Mets, Yankees do it. Everyone has done something like this. It's just sad to see. But if you can't move that Trouba deal, there's not going to be much to be done during free agency. I mean, Adam, we talked about this. I asked you, is it frustrating not being able to make any big moves while you're watching other teams improve and figure out ways to make moves? I mean, the team, as the Devils, they made a couple big moves here in the offseason, but, it's all about cap space, and the Rangers just don't have the cap space to do it.
It's definitely frustrating, but when like nothing can happen until the first thing happens. Yeah, it is what it is. You try to approach it. And the state of survival makes a great comparison here. The Wade Redden contract, circa 2006, 7, whatever that was. He was getting $6 million a year at the time just to get it. That's in $2007, so that's insane. And yeah, that's what happens when you play next to Zdeno Chara for the bulk of your career, and then you go somewhere else, and it's like, oh, you're not playing next to one of the all-time great defensemen, so you're not as good.
Right, but again, like this isn't Trouba's problem. Like this
No, it's not Trouba's problem. I'm just saying, yeah, it's the Rangers' problem.
Right.
That's the point. Is they hand out the contracts, and then people want to vilify the player. Now,
yeah, and I just completely disagree with it.
So all right, so let's talk Devils here. We got two Devils fans here. The big deal here is they signed defenseman Brett Pesce, 6 years, $33 million. That was, and Brenden Dillon also as well, 3 years, $12 million. Those were two signings they needed to make on the blue line. They bring back Thomas Tatar on a 1-year deal. They also signed Stefan Noesen on a 3-year deal, bottom 6 guy. They draft massive defenseman who needs to add to his frame, but 6'7" Anton Siliev. They also sent John Marino and a pick to Utah for a couple of draft picks as well. So Marino was clearing out space there so they could sign Pesce. I mean, we talked about Montreal with Chris being happy with the draft. If you're a Devils fan, let's start with you, Ant. You got to be happy with how everything went, between, maybe there was another defenseman you might have wanted it at that spot, but at least with free agency, they addressed the needs, and you guys seem like you're ready to go now, especially after that Jacob Markstrom acquisition.
Yeah, they needed the goalie. They traded for the goalie. They needed defense, and they did that. They needed toughness. And I know Jared has mentioned this on Twitter so many times that I've seen before. This team lacked toughness. I mean, they let Rempe and they let Trouba and they let all these guys run over them throughout the season. And now they finally added some guys. Steph Nason's tough. You got Dillon and Pet. I mean, I feel like this is a big turnaround, and they're going to need a couple of guys on defense like they got in Pesce and Dillon to help out Hughes and Nemec, who kind of were like the lead, had to lead on defense with, man, now I'm losing my mind on players here. He was out all season. Now, why am I doing? Every so often I do this to myself. Who do we
Dougie
lose?
Hamilton?
Dougie Hamilton, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know why I forgot Dougie Hamilton's name. But yeah, losing Dougie Hamilton was a big blow to this team. And, getting him back and the additions here, I like the moves that they made. I don't know how you feel about that, Jared.
So there's a lot of layers to unwrap here. I think the NHL is very much a copycat league. And I think what you saw with Florida winning the Cup this year is with the brand of hockey they play, the physicality, the way they defend, that teams that were behind in that regard in terms of being tough to play against, lacking size, that sort of thing, we need to catch up. Because basically every move, aside from Tomas Tatar, which the Devils just did today, aside from that, every move the Devils made has either been to like address size or to be tougher to play against. And it started with giving Curtis McDermott 3 years, which was in batshit insane move. Like they shouldn't have done that. Like nobody's given Curtis McDermott 3 years, but like they needed guy like, toughness isn't just about like laying hits and getting into fights. It's also, competing and going to the dirty areas of the ice and battling along the boards and all that sort of stuff. And this isn't a real stat, but the Devils give a shit per 60 last year was the worst in the league. Like they just didn't care. They were going through the motions throughout most of the season. They didn't care. They got pushed around, like Anthony was mentioned with the Matt Rempes and the Jacob Troubas of the world. But it wasn't just them. A lot of teams do that, and I think a lot of teams showed that was a very effective way of playing against the Devils. Just play a heavier style, and they just lack the size, on the blue line and up front to deal with it. And the moves they made really addressed that, between getting like two pretty good defensive defensemen in Pesce and Dillon, and Stefan Noesen, who is a guy where like he'll go to the front of the net, he'll go to those areas. He's a bit of a prick to play against. Even trading Alexander Holtz, a former 7th overall pick, for Paul Cotter, who is just a 4th line guy, but like he's a guy who skates hard. And like Steve Dangles said it best on his podcast the other day, like he skates like not only does he hate you, he hates everyone. So like they just need more of like that type of compete level in their organization. And I think they addressed that in spades this offseason.
Let's stay in that division here, because the Rangers finished first. Carolina finished second. Then we all joked around. We all knew that third place was a joke between the Islanders, Capitals, whoever finished there of the world. Devils have improved. Rangers, I don't think they take a huge step back. They're still a top team there. But Carolina, State of Survival says Carolina slides and finishes fourth in the division. They add Sean Walker on the blue line. They keep Jacob Slavin around. They bring back Jordan Martinook, but that's really it there. They don't do a ton. Chris, what do you see with the Carolina Hurricanes here, where how they stack with the rest of the division?
It would shock me if they finish fourth, right? Because if you assume the Devils are better, then the Devils will take that spot, right? And we haven't even talked about Washington. I don't know what those frauds are doing. Are we trying? Are we not? Are we trying to sell jerseys? Too? Yeah, what are I don't know what Washington's doing. I need a whole other I don't know, at least 3 to 5 business days to try to figure out what's going on in that organization. But Carolina comes down to their goaltending, right? How good they are defensively. There are some pieces that are no longer there. I know they didn't have Guentzel all year, but he definitely helped when he was there. So I think it might be a little bit more of a challenge for them this upcoming season than it was last season. We knew, right? The Rangers and the Hurricanes, they would duke it out for that and then whatever else. And I don't know. Do we even care what the Penguins do anymore? Are they even relevant? There's a lot of question marks in that Metro, and it wouldn't shock me to see them slide. What about the Islanders? Or I just don't know what this division's going to give me yet.
Yeah, there's a lot to shake out there. And you mentioned Washington. Let's run through what they did quickly. They sent 2 third-round picks to Vegas for Logan Thompson shortly after trading Darcy Camper for Pierre-Luc Dubois. They get Andrew Mangiapane from Calgary for a 2025 second-round pick. The aforementioned Jakob Chychrun deal from Ottawa, sending out Nick Jensen and a 2026 third-round pick. This one made me scratch my head a little bit. Matt Roy to a 6-year deal worth $34.5 million. If you're a team who's entering a competing window and you're like, you know what, I want to lock down a good, solid second pairing defenseman, that makes sense. But aren't we just trying to compete until Ovechkin's done, which is not that far away? Not sure why. And then Brandon Duhaime depth signing there, 2 years, $3.7 million. So, they made the playoffs last year. They got Charlie Lindgren. If he plays the way he played last year, they're a first round fodder playoff team for somebody, best case scenario, I think here. And that's if Pierre-Luc Dubois actually contributes this year.
All right. So let's put Pierre-Luc Dubois aside for a second, because we know whether or not he cares is a whole other thing. I actually kind of like a lot of the Washington moves in isolation. All right, they make the Mangiapane trade. I think that's a decent, let's take a shot here on a guy who could put the puck in the back of the net, so it's not just Ovechkin.
Skates hard, energy guy, can get the team going. So
right, another energy guy, different type of energy guy. Brandon Duhaime. You know how I feel about tough guys. I feel like every team needs a shithead, and he's a shithead in terms, and I say that in the most endearing quality. I think Matt Roy's a pretty good defensive defenseman, and I think the contract's fairly reasonable. I don't think it's gonna give you a whole lot offensively, but I kind of like that deal. I like them going out and trading for Logan Thompson from the Vegas Golden Knights. That's it's a starting caliber goaltender who's making less than $800,000, and I'm not buying Charlie Lindgren repeating what he did last year. So I thought Vegas. I thought Washington was a team that probably should have been in on a goalie, especially once they traded Kemper to get Pierre-Luc Dubois. I thought they should have been in on Linus Ullmark, but obviously that didn't happen. But getting Logan Thompson here, maybe that's potentially their goalie of the future, moving forward. So I like that, what they did there. You mentioned the Islanders, older team. I do like the Duclair signing, just it gives them a little more speed, but that's just, still a really old team. And Carolina, the one thing I will say about Carolina, and I think we're starting to see this trend a little bit in the NHL, and you guys can tell me whether you agree or disagree. My favorite contract out of all the contracts that were signed during free agency was William Carrier, 6 years, $2 million. He's a known commodity. You know exactly what you're going to get with him. You could put him on the third or the fourth line. He's going to forecheck his ass off. He can skate. He can give you a little bit offensively.
And it's $2 million a year.
Right. That's a guy where his game will play in April, in May, in June. And Carolina is already one of the heaviest forechecking teams in the National Hockey League. So to bring him in for I mean, I'm looking at the cap friendly right now. It's what 2.3% of the cap, and that number is only going to continue to decrease as each year goes on, as the cap continues to go up. I thought that was my favorite contract of the day, and I think we're starting to see more teams in the league like, all right, let's max out on the term. Let's get the AAV lower because this way we have more money to play with now to make the team better. I think to an extent, you probably saw that with the Chris Tanev deal with the Maple Leafs. I heard you guys talking about that when it came on, but I think you even started to see it last year. Like Miles Wood getting 6 years and $2.5 million. I think it's the same thought process. Like, no, don't give him like $4 million. That's stupid. But for 2.5 and just stretch it out over till the end of time. And the salary cap's kind of fake anyways. Like you could always find ways to get rid of contracts. You could always trade someone. You could always buy them out. There's always shenanigans you could do to get out of your back contract. I think we're going to start seeing this more and more with specific players and teams. It's not going to happen with everybody, but I think you're going to start seeing it more.
Vegas found that formula, that's for sure.
Yeah. Cap circumvented. Just call Vegas. They'll help you out. They'll help you figure out. I don't know what you're sipping on, Jared, but I want some of that because you just sound like a Capitals defender right now. This team they have spent their cap hit today, courtesy of the good folks over at Cap Friendly. Rest in peace.
Yeah,
they are at $101 million. And this is a team that I like how some of you are like, oh, they made the playoffs. Nobody made the playoffs in the Metro.
Somebody made it.
The Rangers, the Hurricanes, and then because of the way that everything is structured and because of Gary, that some other team had to make it. Some team had to be there. And the Capitals were the least terrible of the terrible. So this is a team that, and then they go and they look terrible. They did nothing. They looked exactly like the Capitals that we thought they were. Biggest frauds here. And now they've gone out and they've opened their wallet. And you're like, are you guys serious? Because you can't be a rebuilding team with $100 million payroll. Like, you can't do it.
No, they're not. But again, the salary cap's fake. They're like Backstrom's going to finish
cap is
for an
voodoo.
LTIR. I'd be
just
surprised if TJ Oshie even plays this year. Like, to me, they got younger and better.
Yeah, I don't know if Oshie's playing this year. I think that's probably not going to happen at that point.
Someone has faith in the Capitals because
I'd love to be wrong. I would love for them to be terrible this year. It makes it easier for the Devils.
State of Survivor asked who's still unsigned that's worth a look. I mean, right now I think Tarasenko is probably the only player that's not a depth. If you listen, Ryan Suter I know is one of the top defensemen out there, but I mean Dallas just bought him out. I can't see Ryan Suter at this point is a 7th defenseman. So we talked through all those teams in the Metropolitan here. I know there was a couple Jared wanted to get to out west as well. Let's start in my neck of the woods with the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, in the draft, they take Macklin Celebrini first overall. No surprise there. They get smooth skating defenseman Sam Dickinson at 11 after moving up 3 spots in a trade with Buffalo. Make the argument that maybe they should have taken Zeev Boyum there, but either way, they get a top quality defenseman. So they got a nice cornerstone there. Couple of moves in free agency. They signed Tyler Toffoli 4 years, $24 million with the full no movement clause. And then Alex Wenberg for 2 years, $10 million. Also Luke Kunin as well, $2.75 million over 1 year. I don't mind the Toffoli contract if it wasn't a full new movement clause because you want to have a veteran you can put with Celebrini to grow with, somebody to, not going to say he's going to move in with him like a John Tavares kind of situation, but something like that on the line. Then you can put Eklund and Will Smith maybe as, the 2 wings on the other line with, Mikael Granlund in the middle for now and then maybe somebody else. But that Alex Wenberg signing, that one was a real head scratcher. I know you got to get to the cap floor. But what did Alex Wenberg do to deserve a raise?
He's got a pulse.
True. We have been going back and forth on Rip and Riff about the San Jose Sharks. And I'm wondering how much more evidence that we need to finally definitively say Mike Grier doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
I disagree.
I get you have to overpay guys. I get with where the Sharks are, you have to overpay guys to get them to go there. So I get the Alex Wenberg contract sucks. It's $5 million the next 2 years. But at least I get why they did that. I get going 4 years. Did you really need to go 4 years and $6 million per year for Tyler Toffoli? Did you really need to do that? I know Toffoli's still a really good goals. I know he's still a really good goal scorer. I know he's a veteran. I know He's won championships before and rings in the room and all that sort of stuff. But like, did you really need to give him a full no move clause? And then you brought up the salary cap for it. People say it's tough to, oh, they got to get over the cap floor. It's not tough to get over the cap floor. You got to do what the San Jose Sharks did. You got to do what the Sharks did and offered a bunch of mid-veterans a lot of money because you'll be able to get over the floor, which really just goes back to the whole Barclay Goodrow thing and them claiming him for, for absolutely nothing and getting no asset for him. I don't understand what the Sharks are doing. I really don't. Like, all right, now you got some veterans to insulate Celebrini and some of the other young guys you have there, but you can't retain any salary this year to trade anyway. All your retention slots are used. So if you wanted to trade Michael Granlund or if you wanted to trade I don't know, Luke Kunin, who got 2.75 for whatever reason, or Klim Kostin if everybody wants him for whatever reason, like, good luck.
I think the jury for Greer, we can start after this season is when we can really start to evaluate what the hell he's doing. I still think he's doing a good job, and I think he's on the right track. But time will tell.
On good news, we are all connected via Tyler Toffoli.
That's right.
Oh yeah, how about that? It's like a circle of life.
Secondary team. And, Toffoli was a guy that I thought the Rangers would make a play at too. It was Toffoli or DeBrusk. Those were the two guys I said if the Rangers are going to add a top 6 right wing, those are the guys they got to look at. And
he can score goals. He just has no foot speed. And
that's the problem. And
then blocking issues.
And he wanted term, and the Devils didn't want to give him term, and the San Jose Sharks did. But I think you're going to see like year 3 and year 4 that contract is going to be ugly because he lacks the foot speed now, and he's 32. Wait till he's 35.
And at that point, he's not going to be able to play on a line with Celebrini because Celebrini he's going to be dragging behind. So. We'll see. Well, I'm just excited that, I'm going to get to go watch some young stars down in the South Bay this year. If I was able to get down for the 4th of July, I'd go watch the Prospects game. So now we'll stay in the Pacific Division here. We're about 52 minutes in here on the latest Total Hockey Now Free Agents Frenzy recap edition, a little bit of draft as well. Seattle Kraken, they take Berkeley Catton from Spokane, a little bit of a local flavor guy there, dynamic, speedy player. Marshawn Lynch was showing him around afterwards when he got drafted. Make 2 big signings. Defenseman Brenden Montour to a 7-year, $50 million deal, and Chandler Stevenson, 7 years, $43.75 million. Now, from what I could tell on Twitter, while Chris and Jared did not agree on the Capitals, I think they agree on the Chandler Stevenson contract just being like, what are you doing?
Chris, why don't you go first, and then I'll retort.
I want Chandler Stevenson's agent at my next performance review because he can definitely convince management that I am worth way more than what I am. That is a great contract for Chandler Stevenson. Good for him for just committing highway robbery in terms of money and terms. Sometimes you see players get one or the other. No, 7 years for $43 million. Well done, Chandler Stevenson. I get you're a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Well, very nice. But man, how desperate are you down the middle, Seattle, that's the guy you decided to do? I don't know what you're going to get out of Matty Beniers. I don't know what you're going to get out of Shane Wright yet. I get that they're young, but Chandler, good for you, man. I have no problem and everybody else at the NHL has no problem with that because if I'm walking into an arbitration meeting and I'm like, hey, this guy's over here collecting the bank, I want whatever he's having. I want the exact same thing as whatever he's having. The Brenden Montour deal is fine. It needs some help on the back end.
Yeah, I agreed.
It's okay. Nobody's crying about that. But Chandler Stevenson, man. Oh man, I'll reach out to you in March when my next performance review is up. We just bring the agent, obviously, whoever is representing him. Just well done.
And this isn't a knock on what Chandler Stevenson brings as a center. He's a good centerman. He's just, I don't know if he's a $6+ million a year centerman.
He is not, and I think he agrees with that. No way Chandler Stevenson's sitting here going, yeah, I'm worth. No, hey, you walked in there and you asked for the moon, and they said yeah, and he went, excuse me, and then I wonder how long it took him to sign on that dotted line. Did he do it?
You're offering me what?
Yeah, did 12 o'clock strike and then 13 seconds later, pen to paper kind of thing, in case somebody wakes up and the aneurysm is stopped. I'm sure he got to that pronto.
Seattle's another one of these teams. I feel like they've royally screwed up their expansion draft, and they've sort of been chasing it ever since. Just like Detroit, I'm not sure what they're building there. And like you look at the Chandler Stevenson contract, you look at some of the veterans they have there. I don't know what this contract means for Matty Beniers. I mean, I'm assuming Matty Beniers obviously is still a big part of the franchise and what they're doing, but he's an RFA. They're gonna have to pay him, whatever the going rate is for a young center off an ELC, which is probably north of 8 now. And I know he's coming off a down year himself. I don't think I like the Montour contract as much as Chris does, only because I still, this might be unfair to Brandon Montour. I still view him as the player who was just kind of like whatever in Buffalo and Anaheim and wherever else he played before he got to Florida, and all of a sudden was a really good offensive defenseman. But I don't love Seattle's roster. I still don't love their goaltending situation. I know they're kind of stuck with the whole Grubauer thing, and Joey Decort's basically the starter there, but 2 more years of Jordan Eberle, who's 34, and another year, 2 more years of Jaden Schwartz, who's 32. Like, what exactly is this team?
Chandler Stevenson now highest paid forward on that Seattle team. Chandler.
I mean, shout out to him. He secured the bag, but I never hate on guys for securing the bag, but I just don't get what Ron Francis is doing.
I think what happened in Seattle, and if this will make a New York Jets football reference here, when the Jets went to the AFC Championship game in back-to-back years, not to say it was a fluke, but they were not as good as the teams as a team that goes to back-to-back AFC Championship games. They thought they had more than they did, and they eventually fizzled. I think when Seattle took Dallas to the brink in the playoffs 2 years ago, they thought that maybe they saw what Vegas did out of the gate, and like, obviously that's never going to be touched again. They thought, oh, okay, we got in the playoffs in year 2, and build off of that. And I think they just way overachieved in year 2, and now you're starting to see results of that. So
they shot 20% in year 2, and they've been chasing something that was totally unsustainable in the first place ever since. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, sounds about right. And they got good goaltending that year. They got good goaltending too. Yeah. Still got a few teams to run through here. Let's talk a little Utah Hockey Club. Bill Armstrong did drop Utah Yeti in a press conference for what it's worth. I don't know if that was a Freudian slip or it was just the first of the candidates that came to mind. But first, they draft Jerome McGinley's son, Tej. Strong offensive instincts. He's the first ever franchise pick. Keep in mind the Coyotes' history stays in Arizona. So this is a new franchise. So, yes, Josh Doan is on the team, but they would like to maybe have another hockey family be the face of the franchise and not a reminder of, the previous team. Aforementioned the Mikhail Sergachev acquisition from Tampa Bay, sending out Connor Geeky, JJ Moser, and a couple of draft picks. Aforementioned John Marino acquisition from the Devils. They signed Sean Durzi to a 4-year, $24 million deal, and then Juuso Valimaki, 2 years, $4 million, both RFAs. Ian Cole to a 1-year deal, and then Kevin Stenlin to a 2-year, $4 million deal. So teams that, you hear the age-old expression, you build from the blue line out. Utah is exactly doing. They've literally in free agency and over the past week have established what their blue line is going to be, at least for the next few years. So that is the first step. And I think it's, what they got there, considering they're not an expansion team, but they may as well be because of the way the Coyotes were run. I think they got an okay blue line heading into the season.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of their blue line.
You forgot to mention Utah/Arizona legend Shea Weber, newly inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
That's right. Still on the books.
Go ahead.
What were you saying?
No, I was saying, yeah, I was a huge fan of their defense. Durzi and Valimaki were huge in my fantasy team over the last year, and I liked the way they got Sergachev as well. So they had to make some moves here to, have this fan base take part in the Utah hockey team. I don't know why they just didn't name this team already. They had so much time on their hands to get this whole thing settled and have the jerseys, and instead of just have this Utah Hockey Club right off the bat. I feel like they had time to do this.
Yeah, but it would have been rushed. And then I don't, because here's the other thing too. Now it's an event in the middle of the season. You schedule the name reveal on a stretch of the NHL calendar that doesn't have much going on. and now it's it's a way to drive publicity.
So like, are you putting yourself like behind the ball with like merchandise and stuff now? Like you're gonna have people buy Utah hockey stuff whether they buy it or not. I mean, I don't know, but like, are you gonna have fans buy Utah hockey jerseys and then now buy Utah Yeti jerseys or however the team's gonna be called?
Oh yeah, because this is going to be Utah stuff is going to be vintage, and you got people like let's think about it. We were all we all used to buy hockey jerseys probably a lot more than we do now. And if we were Utah hockey fans in that era where we're buying jerseys, you better believe like, oh, I'm getting the black Utah jersey. I'm getting the white Utah jersey. Oh, you're going to be the Mammoth? Great. I'm going to get a Mammoth jersey. So, yeah, it's like Jared. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, the bigger thing. The bigger thing means the money. Yeah, They want the money.
And that's part of it, too. Is like, hey, we can say it's not enough time to properly roll things out. We're just going to go. We'll have the colors and then we'll remarket everything, and then people will have to buy stuff again. So,
right, I'm excited for when the NHL in November drops like their reverse retro. For some teams that haven't been around long enough to even have a reverse retro.
Correct.
They're gonna if the NHL does that this year, it's gonna be their third reverse retro. So like, some teams haven't been here 3 years, and all of a sudden they got reverse retro. It's all about the easy money. I would definitely buy a Utah hockey one if I cared enough. I still think they should be named the Blizzard, man. I know they're going to be called the Yetis now because he slipped it, and that's unfortunate. But
I'm still rooting for Mammoth. Okay, we'll see. But they're making good. Listen, Ryan Smith said that he's going to treat this team as a team that he wants to build, and we're used to not seeing any money spent on the Coyotes or any sort of effort putting into improving the team, and right out of the gate, this is nice. This is impressive.
Yeah, I like what they did in the blue line. I don't really trust their goaltending, but I mean, they're still a work in progress. I'm sure they'll eventually find an upgrade there. My only real complaint with Utah is they didn't do much at forward this offseason. Basically, all they did was sign Kevin Stenlund, who's perfectly fine as a fourth line center. But I mean, they still have plenty of time here to kind of sort through what they have. They got a lot of draft picks who are going to be coming up through the system. They still have a ton of draft picks in the arsenal to go out and make future trades and $15 million in cap space. So I guess they could always call up any cap strap teams and be like, yeah, we'll gladly take whoever this is for a third round pick next year. Absolutely. Let's go.
So yeah, there's Utah. Still a few teams we want to touch on before we just run through some quick moves and wrap things up here on Total Hockey Now on the Total Hockey Now Twitter and YouTube network. We got next up the Blackhawks. They had the second overall pick. They take Artem Levshunov out of Michigan State. No surprise there. Him and Bedard are going to be your cornerstones. They also get a couple of other guys later in the first round that could, contribute a couple of years. And then the Blackhawks kind of made moves to fill out their roster. They get Ilya Mikheyev in a trade with the Canucks. They signed TJ Brody, Alec Martinez, Teuvo Teravainen, Craig Smith, Pat Maroon, and then they bring Laurent Brossoit to help with the crease there. So I don't think anybody's expecting any drastic improvements in Chicago, but they will actually have a roster where you recognize most of the names dressing every night.
Adam, Pat Maroon's there. That's a Stanley Cup run waiting to happen.
Oh, I know. It's just that's it. They're going to sneak into the playoffs. They're going to upset
Stanley Cup confirmed.
They're going to upset Edmonton in the first round, and they're just going to go. That's
it. I mean, good for them for trying to get to the cap floor, and then they just kept spending. I guess they got addicted. So good for them. They're going out here to get all these players who can, I guess, support the kids, which is nice. I guess they're trying to do what they did with Taylor Hall and Corey Perry. I'm hoping it goes a little bit better this time than it did last time. But I mean, at least there's players on the roster that we don't have to like hockey DB their name and be like, what European team did you play for 3 years ago? How did you get here? So as somebody had asked about Twitter, they're like, explain the Chicago Blackhawks to me. And I was like, Phil, absolutely. They did a lot of things, but they are still terrible. And it's going to be a really difficult year next year as well. So if you're expecting greatness next year, Chicago fan, may I suggest something else?
Put Patrick Maroon.
If he breaks if he does it, I mean, straight to the Hall of Fame. Straight. There's no waiting period. There's no nothing. Just straight into it. Just like if Corey Perry goes back to the finals and loses, straight to the Hall. He's probably going to make the Hall of Fame, but no waiting period. Straight to the Hall of Fame. study him for research purposes. Homie's defying the odds. I want him to pick 6 numbers between 0 and 49 and just message me so I can know for no particular reason, of course.
You heard it here first. Pete Mrazek, Vezina winner.
And hey, they still have 2 retention slots available. So if Taylor Hall can manage to stay healthy for longer than 10 minutes, they could turn around and trade him and Alec Martinez at the deadline for 50% retain each and pick up even more assets moving forward. So, yeah, they'll be bad, but at least they'll be fun bad.
Yeah, they'll be fun to watch bad. They'll be competitive bad, maybe. Dallas, a team that didn't have to do much, probably couldn't do much anyway. They bring in Casey DeSmith on a 3-year deal worth $3 million. They bring back Matt Duchene on a 1-year, $3 million team-friendly deal. They signed defenseman Matt Dumba, 2 years, $5.5 million. Ilya Lyubushkin, 3 years, $9.75 million. Nils Lundqvist ends up coming back, and they also bring in Brendan Smith. So a little bit like Utah, they're focusing on making sure the blue line is in good shape because that was one area, even with the Chris Tanev addition, they did not have a ton of depth once somebody got hurt. So I don't mind any of these moves. I know not the biggest Ilya Lyubushkin fan, Chris. Dumba is what he is at this point, but I mean, getting him at $2.75 million a year and Lyubushkin at what 3.25, like, okay, whatever. They need to put people on the blue line and fill it out. I think they'll still be right up there at the top of the division.
That is good for Dallas. I don't know. I looked at their moves and went, okay.
They did what they had to do. It
was like reading a fun stat on the back of a cereal box. You're like, oh, yeah, good to know. And then I just moved on and I continue with my day. That was how that's how I felt about the Dallas Stars. Not that they did anything good or bad. I'm just like, okay, good.
Who knew the Tricks Rabbit was good at cricket? Who knew? So you got for kids. So the Colorado Avalanche can't do much with their cap situation. They bring back Jonathan Drouin on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal, which I think makes sense for both sides because Drouin has not played this well in his career. So, consistently. So makes sense to go back and they could get him cheap. They did get a deal done with Casey Middlestat last week, 3 years, $17.25 million. And then they bring in Eric Brandstrom at a 1-year deal, $900,000. He's going to fill out that third pairing there with Calvin DeHaan. I mean, maybe he's never going to live up to his draft pedigree, but maybe playing with Makar, he'll pick up something there. But Colorado really hamstring there and couldn't do too much.
Speaking of capnastics here for them, Valery Nichushkin's money doesn't count. That's a whole other conversation. Then we got a deal. Remember Gabriel Landeskog? At some point, he's got to get under that cap as too. There is. If I'm Colorado, I'm making just maybe not a phone call because you can trace phone calls, but I'm meeting in a coffee shop somewhere in between Vegas and Colorado, small little city, where the cell phone reception goes out. Maybe a deli, order the, I was going to say smoked meat sandwich, but they don't have that. I don't know, whatever you order in a deli in the States. And then just have a conversation about how cap circumventing goes. You know what I mean? And then see how they can work that around. Because Colorado has no money and they probably need those. They would want those players to come back and be good and contribute. So I'm trying to do math here and the math's not mathing. So,
I mean, the halfway point would be in Utah between Denver and Vegas, but obviously now you got a hockey team there, so you can't meet there because it could be ears listening. So yeah, you maybe. When I had to move across the country, you get into Eastern Nevada, pretty much any of those towns you'll be safe. Elko, Jackpot, any of those. Yeah.
What? Meet in South Dakota or Wyoming, man. I don't know anything about those two states, nor do I care to know. So Wyoming, I feel like they'd be
state to drive across. Beautiful.
No offense to the people of Wyoming, probably a state I'll never visit. Idaho as well. I just those are the ones you forget when you're trying to name 50 states. You're like, oh yeah, Wyoming. I forgot you exist. So have a conversation in Wyoming about cap circumvention. You'll be good.
Do you need to cap circumvent when you can just trade Ross Colton and the Devils?
I mean, that's a guy that was being thrown around too. So yeah, I mean that's a guy that has some trade.
Anaheim Ducks still have to get to the floor. They've been trading and signing a couple of players. They still don't have enough money to be decent, to actually start the year. So I don't know. I'm assuming there'll be a dumping ground for contracts.
They were
Yeah,
also the least active team in free agency. So
they're going to do something in terms of taking on bad contracts.
Vancouver Canucks, they signed Dakota Joshua to a 4-year, $13 million extension. Then they signed Jake DeBrusk to a 7-year, $38.5 million deal. Love that contract. That he's going to fit in great there. They also bring in Danton Heinen, Kiefer Sherwood on depth deals. They signed Tyler Myers. He didn't want to go anywhere. 3 years, $9 million. So everybody's happy there. And they also bring in Vincent Desharnais on a 2-year, $4 million deal from Edmonton. So the addition of Jake DeBrusk, Brock Besser tends to go hot, cold. Hopefully DeBrusk can be a little bit more of a consistent scoring presence to fill those voids when Besser isn't lighting the lamp. We expect Vancouver to compete again next year, right back at the top of the division.
I think so.
I lost my train of thought because all I'm seeing next to Jake DeBrusk is NMC. It's like, wow, he got full no move. Good for him.
And full no move. I mean, that's the thing. Like, they hand these things out like just no problem.
Like Halloween candy.
Yeah, and then like, and you can't move the guy in 5 years. Oh, well, screw his no movement clause. Well, don't give it to him. Akira Schmid and Alexander Holtz. We talked about that trade earlier. Let's talk about the Vegas side of it. So that the Knights get their backup goalie, and can't you just see Alexander Holtz, if they put him on that top line next to Eichel, all of a sudden he just figures it out because he's playing with Eichel? I could see that coming from a mile away.
Yeah, he just wasn't going to make it in New Jersey, and goodbye, sweet prince, Akira Schmid. He did for 4 games against the Rangers in the playoffs is what we needed him for, and he did that job, and now he's gone. He's out of here.
They didn't even qualify him. They didn't even qualify. He's a free agent. He's sitting out there somewhere.
And then also they bring in Ilya Samsonov and then Pavel Dorofiev, 2-year deal, 3 point. Victor Olofsson. So Vegas too. They figure out ways to circumvent the cap, but I feel like now their roster's actually starting to look a little more normal and not as beefed up with some of these players they got to fill in here.
Yeah,
we'll
when
check
they need
in
Mark
on
Stone.
Marcel. I was just about to say that. We'll check in trade deadline when Mark Stone goes on IR and they add somebody. We'll get there. It's too early in the year. Mark Stone's back is fine.
Yeah, Vegas isn't going to let Jonathan Marchessault and all the guys that walk out the door. They're not just going to stamp out. That's not how they operate. Like they're going to do something. I don't know what it is because they just don't really have any prospects to trade. They don't have their first round pick the next couple of years, but I mean,
second highest cap hit, $10 million behind again, the Washington Capitals.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a team for Mitch Marner, that would be the team, right?
I feel like that's a deadline deal again.
Yeah.
Or Toronto retains 50% to get it done, and then Mark Stone's back injury, followed by whoever else gets there, he can clear the cap.
They'll find a way. They always do. A couple more teams will round things out here. Edmonton, the defending Western Conference champions. They bring back Calvin Pickard, so they got their crease for the future with Stu Skinner and him. Connor Brown, Corey Perry, Matthias Janmark all coming back, and then they add Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner, and bring back Adam Henrique after acquiring him at the trade deadline. So, Edmonton at least seems to have, we said they didn't really have that depth with forwards. Now they seem to have that a little bit. They can actually roll a few lines and maybe spread it out a little bit.
Are we going to hammer the Jeff Skinner over 30 goals? We're going to do it now. We're going to do it later.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously going to play on McDavid's line and just, light it up. So, yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Going to take away chances, though, from Zach Hyman.
See what Zach Hyman's total is and bet the under. That's not a bad way to go either.
Just trying to find a way how I can retire 20 years earlier, and I feel like Jeff Skinner could help that.
We had maybe taken Stamkos to the Predators. Maybe that would have helped a little bit. But hey, hindsight's 20/20. Yeah, Edmonton, no reason they can't be back in the mix next year as one of the top teams, and it looks like they've actually done some stuff to make sure that they get back there. Columbus, the last team we'll do a quick discussion on. Take Caden Lindstrom in the draft, who is him and Adam Fantilli down the middle should be a nice 1-2 punch for years to come if they can ever figure out how to run a hockey team. Otherwise, I know you mentioned Ottawa earlier as being like the Coyotes, replacement as being the team everybody loves to stomp on. But I mean, Columbus is right there too. So Columbus and Ottawa, one of those two. And then they signed Sean Monahan, 5 years, $27.5 million, reuniting him and Johnny Gaudreau. And if that doesn't get Johnny Gaudreau going, then they really need to figure out how to get that contract off the books ASAP.
Has anybody been to Columbus willingly?
No.
That's what I thought. So, I mean, they're basically the Ottawa of the United States. That's how I would see it.
I know more like Winnipeg of the United States in terms of, like being in the middle of nowhere. At least Ottawa serves a purpose as a capital.
Ottawa serves no purpose. Tell me you've never been to Ottawa without telling me you've never been to Ottawa. That's what I got from there.
There you go. Yeah,
My apologies to the good people of Ottawa, but don't come tell me your city is. You're just like a crossing point for
Columbus
people who do government.
The Blue Jackets have 4 defensemen under contract, and 2 of them are Ivan Provorov and Eric Goodbranson, who both stink. So, like, what are they doing on the blue line?
I think management's trying to figure out what they're doing too. I think they're just on autopilot right now. They're just cruising into the. They're just going to cruise into next year.
I think management's more worried about trying to figure out who's coaching the team. They don't have a head coach.
There's just going to rotate a coach every. I could coach that team next year, and it doesn't even matter. I'm going to play good Branson and Provorov.
They have 65 points next year.
They're very much in the top overall pick sweepstakes, and as they usually are. So business as usual there in Central Ohio. So there's all the big moves there from free agency. I'll just run through a couple other ones here, or the draft. Calgary got Zane Parrick, top offensive D-man in the draft. We talked about the Andrew Mangiapane trade. Let's see here. Los Angeles, they get Tanner Jeannot from Tampa Bay. And for a second-round pick and pick 118 in this previous draft, they signed Warren Fogle and added Joel Edmondson on the blue line. So Kings just making some, depth moves there. Anaheim, a little bit of surprise at the draft. They took Bennett Seneke at 3rd overall. If anybody's seen the video of him being picked, even he was surprised he went that early. But they said he had a growth spurt of 4 inches in the last year alone, and he was still producing. So if he continues to produce with that big size increase, look out. Philadelphia. Not much done in free agency, but they do get a piece of good news. And Matvei Mishkov is coming over. He signed his entry-level contract. So, Philly could also make a run in the East last year, too, for that playoff spot in the Metropolitan, because last year they were that 3 team until the whole Carter Hart situation unfolded. Minnesota takes Zeev Boyum, who I know that was somebody that Jared was looking at for the Devils in the draft. Sharks could have taken him there, too. Him and Brock Faber could be a nice pairing. They signed Jake Middleton to a 4-year extension. They bring in Yakov Trenin, nothing special there. Pittsburgh traded out Riley Smith. They acquire Kevin Hayes from St. Louis, trying to do them a favor. Let's see here. The Blues news today, they signed Pavel Buchnevich to a 6-year, $48 million extension. How did Pavel Buchnevich get $8 million a year? Am I missing something there?
Another good agent. Another good agent, man. Thank the agents.
I just don't see it. But hey, St. Louis is doing their thing, and then Winnipeg didn't really do much draft or free agency. They signed a couple of goalies, whoever will emerge to play 15 games a year instead of Connor Hellebuck, and they had a couple of Colin Miller and Dylan DeMello on the blue line. So before we wrap things up with mask off and say goodbye, let's go around the room. One parting thought about the whole free agency draft, whatever you want, whatever team. What's one thing you like, dislike, whatever it may be? Chris, I'll start with you.
$1.2 billion was handed out on July 1st. The NHL comes out and be like, yeah, salary cut's going up by like $3-4 million. Most general managers just forgot how to count. It's kind of like when you get like your income tax check back. Like it's sometimes like $400, but you end up going out to buy a Mercedes. You're like, I don't think I needed it, but I have all this extra money. I might as well do it. So good to see some NHL general managers out there just shipping the card so they can get those long-term deals on certain players that didn't need one. $1.2 billion on I love it. I love it. What a great time to be here. Remember once upon a time, like the salary cap was like, I don't know, 30-40 million dollars. And now it's just, we're spending $1 billion in a day. So it's a good day. It's a good day to be a player in the NHL, and it's only going to get better.
All right, let's go clockwise here. Jared, you're next.
If you're under 6'1", you better have an elite skill set in the NHL if you want to get paid, because otherwise, the 200 hockey men are not going to draft you in the early rounds of the draft, and they are not going to give you your qualifying offer when it comes time to be a free agent, and they are not going to pay you when it's time to be a free agent, because 200 hockey men are going to do 200 hockey men things.
To Chris's point, before we get to Anthony, when the salary cap was introduced in the 05-06 season, it was $39 million was your budget for the team. Imagine that. And the Rangers gave Wade Redden $6 million a year 2 years after that. My God,
alive!
What a time to be alive. Ant, you're up.
Look, we always talk about how the NHL playoffs is the best in any sport. The NHL free agency is pretty much up there for me as well. You know, I sit through as a baseball fan 4 or 5 months of waiting for a top free agent to sign with no salary cap whatsoever. And to see all this get done in a day, it's kind of like you mentioned. I think we talked about this through text, like a holiday almost, that you got to kind of take off for and just watch and enjoy all these teams try to sign these free agents and get creative and trades and all that stuff. I wish that other sports would be like this as well, because it is a fun time, and more sports need to be into doing that.
NHL free agent. Go ahead.
Also, shout out to Shane Pinto. 3.75 over 2 years. Don't blow it all at the sports book there, buddy.
Yeah, maybe don't bet this time. Maybe or have a friend do it for you. That way, if Shohei Ohtani's friend gets in trouble, not you. I'm gonna say I think one of the reasons that this was so active is I think because there was that short window from when the cup ended, right into the draft, right into free agency. I think a lot of these teams are like, let's just get this shit done today. Because there have been years where the first day of free agency has had activity but wasn't a flurry, and it's carried into day 2, even day 3. There's not going to, other than Vladimir Tarasenko, like there's really nobody left out there that's like notable signing. So I think that had a lot to do with it. I think next year, maybe hopefully it can be spread out a little bit, maybe like a week off between, the end of the Stanley Cup and then the draft. I don't mind the draft and free agency being back to back. I actually really like that because I think it makes teams more active. But, a little bit more time. I feel like the Florida Panthers didn't even really get their love. It was like they won the Stanley Cup on a Monday, and then by Wednesday, I was like, well, all right, it's time to get ready for the draft. Screw you guys. So,
and also, remember, there were some moves that were made during the Stanley Cup Finals. What's going on? Like, Markstrom happened during the Stanley Cup Finals. Like, a lot of trades happening.
And probably it would have been more spread out, but the NHL, I kind of think the NHL told teams like, hey, first few games of the Stanley Cup, let's not, no Jakob Markstrom trades. No. Just hold
Thanks,
up.
Gary.
Yeah. So like it was, and I think I sent it was to Jared yesterday, that they're going to have a spread out. They have a proposal to make the schedule more spread out by basically starting the one less preseason game or 4 max, and then like starting the season on like October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, not like October 9th and 11th. So, hey, that week and a half can make a difference, but it was a great free agency period here. Certainly lived up to what we want. And now we get to maybe settle back a little bit, let the chips fall, let the dust settle, do some mock drafts, have a little fun on these podcasts. It's going to be, we're not going away over the summer here, and we're going to continue things on. Just like we always close with, we're going to do a little, instead of sweater weather, we'll do a little mask off today. And for some reason, I don't know if anybody remembers the old goalie, Stefan Fise. Chris probably does as a francophone there. Had a couple of great masks in his day. When he was with the Nordiques, you see that mask on the left there. You got the, the igloo wall with the old Nordiques logo breaking through it. And then on the right, when he was with the Kings, you got the silver tone there. I guess that's supposed to be like a King Tut looking goalie mask there. The Valley of the Kings, I guess is the play on the words there for the goalie mask and why that happened. So you're going to buy one of these goalie masks. If you got money, which one are you taking? I'm going to start with that.
Yeah, first, before I go into that, just shout out to not only Stater Survival, but the 110 people who are watching this show with us today, showing you how important not only this show is, Total Hockey Now, but the NHL free agency. So kudos to everybody there.
Yes, thank you. Everybody watching on the replay as well.
Yeah, when it comes to these masks, obviously, I like the Nordiques, but I don't know, man. That King's mask with King Tut on there, that's done so nice. And you got like the shine off of it. I got to go with the Kings one here, even though I like the Nordiques one, but that Kings one is sweet.
I'm going to go with the Nordiques one. We don't have to think that long and hard about that one, right? That's a good one. Nothing wrong with the Kings one. It's very nice, but I mean, I get like it might be basic, but like the igloo, the Nordiques logo, Send this to Gary. Remind him that it's possible we can see this again. That's the one I'm going.
It's never going to happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't.
Hello, Jared.
See what you did, Adam? You said it's not going to happen, and then Gary kicked Jared.
Yeah, Gary did not like what I said there. He's probably like, Adam, shut up. I know it's not going to happen. You don't need to tell everybody. And here he is telling everybody. And now, Jared has to take the sacrifice from him. I mean, is he even going to be available for Rip and Riff tomorrow? I don't know.
Man,
I was so excited.
If we're sacrificing Jared to get the Nordiques back, I'm sorry, Jared.
I think he might actually be okay with that. And he just sent me a message that the power went out. So I know we were worried about that on my end today, but it ended up happening on Jared's end. So I'm the one that's got 108 degrees here, but Jared's the one with power outages.
Gary's listening. He got the wrong guy, though. Gary, you got the wrong guy, but it's fine. Thank you, Jared, for your sacrifice.
Gary's a part of that 110.
What was that?
Gary's a part of that 110 that's watching this show right now.
Oh, yeah. Gary's got it on the big screen at the NHL headquarters right now going, what is this clown saying about the Nordiques? Tell me so we can end it.
Anytime somebody talks about the Nordiques on like social media or TV or whatever, he gets like a spidey sense kind of thing, and he has to go and address it immediately. So I guess I'm breaking the tie here today. There was a chance we were going to have a split today, but we'll never know. I'm going to take the Kings mask here. It's love the detail. As much as any excuse to get the Nordiques logo out there is great, but that mask was just very well done there in the mid-90s there. And, my parents are like Egyptian history buffs, so I kind of grew up in a house that had some of like that stuff around. So like that kind of just speaks to me right there. So yeah, I'm going with the King Tut mask.
Just look at the shine on the artwork, though. It's like, that's solid.
This is when goalie mask technology really started to take off with the painting of it.
Yeah, that would be solid today, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Quick probably has the best Kings mask of all time with, the Knight, and then I would say second best is Kelly Rudy, who's got like the Hollywood sign with like the old reel-to-reel like film and stuff like that. That's a good one too. I think we've had that here on a previous edition of Mask Off. So there we go. The Kings mask wins over the Nordiques mask. Nordiques lose again. No surprise there. Womp womp.
Wow.
Fellas, we've been on the air for about an hour and a half today. I think that it's time to call it a wraps. What do you think?
Well, we had to give the fans what they wanted. We missed out last week, especially when the Stanley Cup ended, and kudos and salute to the Florida Panthers for not blowing that Stanley Cup, because I feel like it would have been a lot worse if they blew that instead of Edmonton losing it in 7. That would have been a lot worse for Florida. So kudos to them for winning it. And man, these these South teams keep winning. They keep winning. People like playing there.
And Dallas can be in that team next year. They're technically a Sun Belt team. Nashville hasn't won a cup. It's only been there once. Made the upgrades.
Shout out to states with no income tax. That's apparently the secret.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it certainly is a factor when you don't have that chunk of change coming out of your paycheck every week or however NHL players get it. But folks, don't forget, give us a rate, review, subscribe on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. There, you see it scrolling across the screen, and we really appreciate you tuning in today. All 120 plus of you, and anybody watching on the replay. We thank Mr. Jared Moore for joining us for the back half of the show. Hopefully, your power comes back on soon, bud. Not that you're seeing this right now anyway, but we're going to be back with you next Tuesday. We're going to be back with you weekly here. Maybe we'll take a week or two off at some point during the summer, but we're going to be with you weekly mock drafts, keeping you up to date on NHL news. But for at Rivera86 and for at Fuzzy Chris91, I'm at Pucking Thoughts, Adam Bernard. We'll be back with you next Tuesday here on Total Hockey Now on the Total Hockey Now Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook.